People are fascinated with the idea of relationships. For the next 100 years, you can make any TV show, any book, or whatever, any YouTube video, Insta, whatever, any of these videos. People are always going to watch it. Doesn't matter if they're in a relationship or not. It's such a fascinating subject. It triggers a lot of different like dopamine places and interests in the brain, uh, and that's so it's going to be a fascinating subject forever. But interestingly enough, nobody knows the answer. In other words, there's a relationship crisis in the world. Different communities in the secular world, they're saying that a few years from now, 50% of women under the age of 30 will now have kids, and then there's a huge percentage of men just the period that gave up or walked away. But whatever happened, now in religious communities, you would think it's different, but the reality is there are. Not talking about universally, but I'm talking about, but sort of locally, in the New York single scene, between New York, New Jersey, and upstate, and all those places, about 5,000 single people, and the amount of people that are getting married in that whole ecosystem of 5,000 people is probably 200-300 a year, which is less than 10%, which means it's going to be a chronically single community for the foreseeable future. And in 20-30 years from now, you're just going to have single people probably congregating and living in like these places with like smaller houses and whatever. That's just going to happen, or buildings of single people. But what happened is what everyone wants to know and what's going on. And there's a couple different reasons why there is a relationship, what they call a crisis or whatever. Um, People stop using the word crisis because, I don't know, people, I guess, stop talking about it. I remember hearing a lot about it. Shidduch crisis, that was 10 years ago. If that was a crisis, I don't know what it is today. Today it's not a crisis anymore because people are just accepting what happened and they just moved on with their life and they decided to be single, and that's just how it is. So it no longer feels like a crisis, but it's still, you can still call it a crisis. There's a couple different reasons, a couple different ideas. Number one is people used to need to get into relationships. In other words, no two people ever really liked each other. Professor Yerna Klappholt said that in Yiddish. He said, "Keine zwei Menschen können sich gut hassen haben in der Mitte." No two people ever wanted to get married to each other. Yeah, not true. In your case, you're the only one, right? You wanted to, right? No one ever wants to get married. They are getting married, but in other words, it's a sentiment that's expressed many times by women, but I think everyone has it. I'll take this person even though. Okay, I am lucky to get the person, but even though. So no two people actually really want to get married to each other. So to begin with, till now, it was more of an idea of survival, and you had to be in a relationship. Now, all of a sudden, you don't have to be, and there's a lot of people that are like, just aren't, because you don't have to be anymore. Now, people always say, everyone wants to get married, everyone wants to procreate. Well, yes, that is true, but it depends which community you belong to. Communities that get married get married. So generally in America, more ethnic, traditional communities, people get married. In the Jewish community also, people that are in the frum Jewish world, people get married. But once people leave that, not necessarily they're not frum anymore, but they leave the frum world that gets married and enter into the single world that doesn't get married, they're in a different community, even though they're still part of the frum community, maybe like the fringe of it, but they're still technically 100% frum, but they're still part of the frum community, but in a different section of it, and that's a single section. Once you enter into that, people aren't getting married anymore. So it has to do with which community you belong to. It's not all people. Single communities don't get married. Married communities, people get married. And they say in friend groups also, once one person gets married, it's like the joke is, it's like suicide. It comes in waves. I think that's funny. Anyway, so it used to be that people had to, people no longer have to, and people therefore are not. There's another outside voices right now in general society, and it definitely seeps into the Jewish world as well. And again, people that are still totally religious, etc. That's the idea of Marxism that you find mostly on the internet, and the general society as well. Marxism tells you that there's a very binary. Marx was a very binary person. He didn't believe in gray area. He didn't enjoy life. He was a pretty. I would think that he was a pretty nasty person, or the person that brought Marxism into fruition. And Marx had an idea that there's a master-slave dialectic, and who has power? There's power, the people in power, and people without power or less power. They came up with the philosophy Marxism came up with during the Industrial Revolution, when people were leaving towns and going into cities. Marxism has brought untold hundreds of millions and millions of people have been killed because of these ideals of Marxism, because they're quickly taken over by people who have bad intentions and spread those ideas for the whole world. So one of these ideas that came into American society came in the 60s, is that the idea that men are power and women don't have power. So therefore, it's binary, that men are in power, women don't have power. Women are the oppressed, men are the oppressors. And that entered into, now you weren't working men against men or women against women, you were working men against women. So you were splitting up the sexes. One should realize to think that they're being oppressed by the other person. And therefore what happened is that you started empowering the worst of women in their attitude towards men. And you started telling them that if they have children, which is their gift to the world, even though it's extremely difficult, right? And it destroys the body and it takes away the person's, even though it can give, even if it gives the person a lot of joy, it's a very, very difficult thing to do. And people that don't give birth to children don't realize nearly how hard it is. But they told you that of creating life into the world, and they said that's actually an idea of oppression, that you're being oppressed if you do that. And therefore, and the man is your enemy, and therefore they came and they essentially got into the way of relationships, and they took the most sacred thing, the most important thing, but it comes with a lot of noise, and a crying baby is a very noisy thing. It's not as cool as hanging out in a single community. Especially if you're single, it's a very depressing place to live. If you're in Brooklyn, to live in Bushwick's a lot more fun than to live in Flatbush. Flatbush, a lot of family and a lot of anxiety. Bushwick is cool and parties and there's nothing to worry about. So they took that idea and ideas that were issues with lack of equality when it came to women. So it was a special type of cancer that came in on a real issue, carried itself into society, and made everyone hate each other and destroy relationships. And the idea was, how can we destroy society? And sadly, they succeeded. Now, we don't see their success now. Their success isn't going to come to fruition over the next many years. But that's why you have essentially big portions of the population, especially in Western countries, in America. In Israel, you don't have it that much, but in America, you totally have that one person after another, they're nasty and bitter towards other people because they were brought up with, they were brainwashed with this notion that they're oppressed, and because they're oppressed, therefore they could act in any way, shape, or form that they want to act, and they're justified for that, and that's it. So Marxism they couldn't win America militarily because there's no chance. They couldn't win America economically, there's no chance either. So when you do that, so the only way you can win is socially. So they went after it socially, and they totally did a great job. They brought a lot of darkness and suffering to the world. As you see, 10, 20 years ago, you didn't hear about this online. Now you're seeing people coming online and talking about how lonely they are and how they want people to approach them. Well, Marxism destroyed it all, unfortunately, and that's how it's going to be. And this is not even the beginning of the disaster. This is just chapter 1. It's already written. Now the check is being filled out, and you're looking at a very, very dark era in American society. American society will not be the same way in the future because of this. This is the reason why relationships is a crisis, or whatever the word you want to call it, that they fell apart. That's essentially the reason. Because any other issue, you could say economics, you could say online dating, anything else could be dealt with. Other countries have the same things and they deal with it, and people still get married. Maybe a little bit less, but it still happens. Over here, the whole thing stopped. The whole thing died. Why?